What's going on, guys? This is Pseychie, and after a long break, we're back with weapon showcases. And for once today, I'm actually really excited to try out this new weapon. Now, the Bladed Tonfas is yet another weapon added from the latest DLC, but it did go through a couple changes throughout this last hotfix. For one, I was actually really uncertain of what the original version of this weapon was supposed to do. The wording on it was a little bit ambiguous. I did get like a glimpse of this weapon before the DLC even launched through leaks. However, my original fear is that it might be just too similar to Swiftsword, which we already have in the game. That being said, after today's showcase, I was very wrong about that, which is a good thing. You see, the description on this weapon reads that your damage scales with your movement speed. That is as clear as mud because I have no idea what that means. You can actually crit with this weapon, but it is a little bit weird as to how it's supposed to work. So originally in the patch when the DLC just came out, you needed to have a speed boost and then you needed to land the first hit in order to activate the crits for like a couple seconds. I originally thought it was supposed to have some kind of threshold where you needed to be faster than a certain speed in order to activate the crits, but I'm not sure anymore. However, they did manage to hotfix this. Now you don't need a speed boost anymore. You just have to land the first hit and then you can land crits. Now this is very helpful for a couple reasons. First of all, it lifts the restrictions, and for what I've seen, the damage is actually pretty solid just by on its own. Now of course, just like a lot of other weapons with crit conditions, if you don't land the first hit, then you're not gonna end up doing a lot of damage. But I do think that the skill ceiling for the Bladed Tonfas is actually at a really good spot right now. And if you just ignore my horrendous mistakes of jumping into the puddles of poison, as I always do like at least once per run, you'll see that the Bladed Tonfas is able to hold up very well on its own. Of course, there is a bit of nuance to it, as if you just keep standing still and you keep swinging the Bladed Tonfas, you're not going to activate the crits again. You absolutely have to dash at something in order to get to it first. And right there, it was just me messing around because I had an amulet that gave me immunity to poison. If only I got that like 2 minutes earlier. So here's where I'm gonna be a bit more open to experimentation. I picked up Initiative, which is not a mutation that I normally pick. And here I'm just watching my spider monster turn into the adult. I did show this off camera, but they do manage to grow up rather quickly, which is good. However, if you find a new leg hugger, you are gonna have to make it grow up all over again, which can get a little bit annoying, but from what I can tell, if you really tried, you can probably make one grow up in like a single biome. So really the leg hugger is only good at around the mid game and the late game. So it's a really interesting dynamic. I'm not gonna do like an exclusive showcase on this new pet because I don't think it's worth it. I do think it's rather average in terms of damage, but it does a pretty good job of applying bleed, which is a very staple aspect of brutality. So heading into Corrupted Prison, I'm not having too much trouble with this run so far, but this part of the run is like the ultimate test for a new weapon. If it can hold up against these sludge monsters, then that means it's pretty good. And just like that, I was really surprised. I for sure thought that it was going to struggle in this biome like most early game weapons do. But as you can see, just a single dash from the Tonfas and then those sludge monsters are dead in like 3 hits, which is extremely powerful. Now this is originally what I expected out of any brutality weapon. It just needed to do decent damage at this stage of the game. If it's like a ranged weapon, sure, I can probably forgive it, since, you know, you're probably going to be far away. At this stage of the game, especially Corrupted Prison or the Prison Depths, this is when the damage is going to stagnate if you're using a weapon that's like a bit on the weaker side. But luckily, this is not one of them. I mean, even against those slammers, a couple hits is able to kill them. If only I can say the same about some other weapons in the game. So right now my build is gearing towards a bleed-focused kind of archetype. I was hoping to get a bunch of affixes on the Tonfas, maybe like, you know, damage to bleeding enemies. Now, that being said, now that I've showcased the Bladed Tonfas, I think I have showcased every weapon that I want to before doing like a tier list of sorts. But again, I'm not sure if I want to wait because since the next major update is going to overhaul a bunch of things, it might give me like a clear picture of these weapons as to what the real potentials are going to be. So now you might be asking, am I going to be doing a showcase on the Wrecking Ball? Well, the answer is no, at least not yet. I do think that the buff is significant enough that it's kind of viable now, but It's just not my kind of thing. I will try it out if it's like an interesting weapon, if they update it to a point where it's actually pretty unique. I mean, look, I have nothing against slow melee weapons. I actually have the next showcase ready, and that is going to be an oven axe showcase. I know. I've said a lot of things about that weapon in the past, but I was honestly quite surprised on the outcome of that run. So stay tuned for that one. It's probably going to come out like 1 or 2 videos after this one. So at this stage of the game, I have pretty decent scroll counts. I think at around like the first boss, you should have around like 14 to 16. That is considered to be like the sweet spot. But one thing that the Bladed Tonfas does really well is burst damage. Now this kind of playstyle, these burst kind of playstyles is only really present in like a few select weapons. One other one that I can think of right now is Rapier. So with the Bladed Tonfas, you'll see me whiff the dash a couple times, but this is like entirely your fault. You can't really blame RNG for this. So there is like this learning aspect where you have to master like the distance of the dash in order to maximize your damage output. I mean, look, Cleo in the Guardian fight does the most amount of damage out of all the 3 Guardians, so you would think that this is the most powerful weapon out of them all, right? So while I'm at it, I'm just gonna list like the other weapons that I'm not going to showcase, at least for now. Those are the Shark, the Gilded Yumi, as well as the Hand Hook, and adding on top the before mentioned Wrecking Ball. I'm not saying that they don't have potential, I just feel like they don't serve like a specific function in the game just yet. I'm sure if they make like an archetype later on into updates that really make those playstyles viable, then I will be more than happy to try them out. I feel like this lineup of weapons from the Queen of the Sea DLC is a bit lackluster compared to the older DLCs. But honestly, this is Motion Twin we're talking about. They're gonna update the game, so you know they're gonna make them viable. Also, I just discovered this in like the past couple days, or I guess like a couple weeks. But the Smoke Bomb is making a surprising comeback in terms of viability, especially in bosses. So I think there's a bug in the game. Well, I'm not sure if it's a bug or an intended feature, but if you use the Smoke Bomb and then you attack the boss with any kind of hits, that hit will ignore the boss damage cap. Again, I'm not sure if this is a bug or not. It does have some crazy damage scaling modifiers on the bomb, which I guess makes sense considering it has like, what, a 20-second cooldown? Do I think it should be nerfed? Absolutely not. I think even though if it's not intended, it does serve like a niche function in bosses to actually make it somewhat viable. I mean, invisibility in the game is already pretty hard to come by, adding on top of the fact that it does not work in bosses, and its use is pretty limited in biomes as well. Of course, unless you can apply it constantly. So I'm gonna pick up a legendary spike shield in the previous room, and this is gonna be a really worthy investment because this is a legendary shield, and in case if we have to go to Hand of the King, I can just deflect all the bombs, and then the boss is pretty much toast from there. Though of course, I'm not sure if they fixed that bug with legendary items just yet. Some people are cheesing the game pretty hard with it, so that is something that you can look to if you want. So I knew from the start that this fight is going to have some trouble, mainly from the fact that the Bladed Tonfas is just really mobile. You can't really expect it to hit all of the hits in the combo, even if you do land the crit. So it does like we are gonna stay in this fight for a pretty long time, but at this point the damage is really good. If it can handle like the tentacles in 1 or 2 hits, then you know that the weapon is gonna hold up very well, especially in the later game. I mean, a lot of people think that the early game is actually harder than the late game because your scroll stats doesn't exactly match up with how much damage you're actually supposed to be dealing. Since DPS is usually like something that I don't really pay attention to, but on 5BC, having lower DPS will impact your run. It's going to make the game harder. While I do like to have fun every now and then, you do have an advantage if you use like a quicker and better weapon. And as this fight's coming to a close, I'm still wondering what Leg Hugger is doing. It doesn't seem like it's really doing all that much, though it is tagging them with bleeding, right? So I was feeling really confident about this, and I decided to go to the Slumbering Sanctuary. It's not often that I come here, and later on, after I activate the switch, I am gonna regret this decision a little bit. The lack of food shop really hurts the viability of coming here, though some people just really like the biome. I actually really enjoy the flavor of it. I just feel like there could be some quality of life changes. For example, after you activate the switch, you have to go back to like the beginning of the level, which is a little painful to go through because you have already gone through that area already, and having to go through it again, especially on 5BC, is a little bit tedious. And I'm just gonna ignore any elites that I come across. Thankfully, I didn't aggro it. This curse in the Slumbering Sanctuary is harder than a lot of other curses, because the enemies here are pretty tough. And I was really surprised because I did not expect that fireball to like travel across the entire platform. So I was prepared for that, thankfully. And finally, I'm able to lift the curse and finally breathe a little bit easier. So let's just continue on with the run. At this point, this is where we would enter the quote-unquote late game, where if your weapon's strong enough, you can basically one-shot anything. So here I'm gonna activate the switch, and I'm really going to start regretting this decision because, yeah, those golems, they hit pretty hard. I thought for sure I was gonna tank at least like 3 or 4 hits before dying, but that does not like it's going to be the case anymore. Now this is on brutality, so this build is squishier than, I don't know, something from survival, because I was really banking on the fact that the dash attack from the Bladed Tonfas can one-shot the golems, which do not actually seem to be the case, though it does get pretty close sometimes. At least my rationale for this build right now is to just bank anything on the first hit because I have initiative. Now, I really hope that initiative is like a percentage-based kind of damage multiplier thing, because if it's like a flat damage bonus, then it might not be as good as some of the other mutations. I mean, you have stuff like Point Blank, which just does like a percentage bonus, which in my opinion is just better. Initiative is already fringe enough in the sense that it only does like 1 instance of damage boost, and it's not percentage scaling. Though, I mean, of course, this game doesn't exist in a vacuum. Obviously, there's no such thing as like a best in slot build for any color in the game. And I'm gonna run into a lot of trouble with this golem here. So that's taken out a lot of my health. Again, I did not expect they would actually do that much damage. And even more so, I forgot that they had 2 attacks. So this is the part of the game where I'm deciding that the leg hugger doesn't really quite cut it. I'm sure it's okay in the long term because it can technically do unlimited amounts of damage and it will stay on the field forever. But at this point, you really want something really immediate. And I feel like, and the slow, constant DPS nature of leg hugger is okay. I'm sure it can solo entire bosses. The only problem is that it's gonna take you ages. Anyways, I'm really glad that this DLC didn't introduce any broken bugs like Fatal Falls did with the Serenade, where you could like literally get unlimited cooldown on your skills. It only took them like 2 or 3 months to fix it, but here we are. So now we're entering the true endgame, and I was a little bit spooked out by the golems, so I decided to take disengagement. It doesn't hurt to add a little bit more security onto your run. But this was another test I was looking forward to. I was seeing if the Bladed Tonfas can one-shot the ground shakers, and you're gonna see me upgrade to a tier 12 Tonfas. And this is gonna make a lot of difference. Now I'm finally able to one-shot the ground shakers. But I mean, this is like one of the few reasons why you come to the Cavern. It's just too good. This is also the point where I started to get used to the movement patterns from the Bladed Tonfas, because if you like keep spamming the button, you'll reset the combo and dash when you get to like the 4th or 5th hit. So you do have to plan out your moves, which is something I really like about weapons like this. Now, does this weapon feel good to use? Oh, definitely. But I feel like one thing that it does lack is flexibility. I know with the dash mechanic you can technically close in the distance on enemies rather quickly, but I just don't see a reason why you would use this if like Snake Fangs exist, because it can just straight up teleport you to where the enemy is, instead of dashing you forward. So I'm gonna come up to this elite ground shaker, and I was really surprised. Look at that damage. This weapon doesn't joke around for sure. I actually didn't expect any of the weapons from the DLC to really exceed my expectations, but I think if one of them did, it's definitely going to be the Bladed Tonfas. I'm not sure what the gimmick was with the original version of the game, and honestly I do like this version a lot better. So you'll see me kind of whiff some attacks, but again, that's entirely on me. You do have to learn like how much distance you need in order to really get in that damage. And this is the point where I just thought, you know what, leg hugger doesn't really cut it anymore. So I'm just gonna switch to a turret that could get destroyed, but at least it does more damage, right? And this is another part where I kind of regretted coming to the giant, because the Bladed Tonfas really require you to be moving all the time, and this boss does not like that. So you'll see me flying off the fist at certain times. I am trying to kind of steady myself. If you can actually get that damage in, it does a lot. So we're gonna reach the halfway point with this fight. This is taking usually a lot more than I expected. Normally with a giant fight, it's usually over in like 10 or 20 seconds, now that I think about it. But even so, even with the awkward maneuvers, even with the awkward movement, it's still doing so much to the giant. This is probably the one boss that's really susceptible to being melted. And just on a side note, it looks like the giant's crystals are still broken, so this fight is easier than it's supposed to be. But anyways, just cleared out that boss, and we're gonna get into the new content. So I find out that with these long corridors, the Bladed Tonfas performs very well. The thing with those giant anchor guys is that you can't really let them throw their anchor or they'll start disturbing the terrain, which is never to your advantage. Of course, this is the true endgame, so the damage dealt is pretty good. Now, I'm sure if you really wanted to go glass cannon, you would probably fill out your second weapon slot with something else. Say, I don't know, throwing knife or firebrand. But with these foreign items that I don't have much experience with, I think your best bet is to bring a shield. They can just fill this gap in your defense that you're missing, and the spike shield is really one of the best shields in the game. I'll be crazy to pass this up, and plus it's legendary. So what can possibly go wrong, right? So at this point, I'm just running through this entire biome, not really caring too much about anything, ever since the parries from the spike shield can basically one-shot anything by itself as well. So I'm gonna try doing some cool maneuvers where I kind of dash in the air. It does look pretty awesome, because this is also something that I want weapons to have, which is like a style factor. Now, going to the queen route does give you a slight disadvantage because you don't have a food shop anymore. As far as I know, if you go this route, then graveyard or still village is going to be your last food shop in the run, so you do have to be a bit more prepared to handle this. So here is where the giant platform thing is. I'm not sure what to call this. It feels like it's here every single time I come to the Infested Shipwreck, so I'm assuming that it's like a fixed feature of this biome. While I do enjoy the corals, the coral floors, where like it kind of breaks apart once enemies attack it, it also means you'll probably lose your footing, so you have to be really careful with this mechanic. So anyways, I'm gonna get hit, I'm gonna make a huge mistake. I did not expect those bats to do this much damage, but I guess that's just 5 BC for you. I'm gonna be a little bit stingy with healing. I did find a piece of food that I left behind, but at this point any powerful attack will probably one-shot me. Now at this point, I think I've found the exit already. I was just waiting for a piece of food that I knew was going to appear sometime in the biome, so I wanted to wait for that. I wanted to get back a little bit more of my health before tackling the guardians. Anyways, this is one of the few instances in the run where I actually got 60 kills. I probably would have gotten way more in the toxic sewers during my runs if I don't jump into pools of poison, which I always do for some reason. Anyways, I found that piece of food that I was looking for, and we're going to tackle the guardians. Now, I never really gotten used to this chase sequence, so I'm gonna do some experimentations. Now, I know some people recommended that you can just take these guardians out if you're fast enough, so I am gonna try a little bit of that, as you'll see in this next fight. In terms of the attack patterns, I have gotten more or less used to how these attacks go. I just know that the Wrecking Ball Guardian only has like 2 or 3 attacks, and if you can get used to it, then they'll probably never land a hit on you. So this is probably the easiest Guardian to dodge, and just like that, I was just dropping my turrets and I just managed to get its health to like, what, 60%, and then it will stop attacking you. Of course, this is actually the case with all of the 3 Guardians, and this is something that I only found out pretty recently. I thought you were just supposed to, run for your life, and hope for the best that they don't actually get you. But this boss fight is pretty easy, though it is only the first one. It only gets worse from here. So right now, I did manage to no-hit this section so far. I was hoping that I was able to finish off the mace monster before we even got to the second one, but it looks like it's not happening, as the flames are pretty quick, and your damage really needs to be on point if you're going to finish this boss in time. So I'm just gonna focus on escaping for now. And I think this is best for a lot of builds, because if you are going to defeat these monsters, then you should probably do it quick. So here is where terrain generation is gonna screw me up a little bit. Sometimes you just hit that wall and you can't really find a way to proceed. Hate it when that happens, because even if your feet as so much as touch those green flames at the bottom, you are going to take damage, and you're probably going to lose your no-hit. Now, I am aware that they did decrease the health of the guardians and increase the health of the queen, though ultimately I don't think this changes that much about this whole sequence. So anyways, it does look like I defeated the Wrecking Ball Guardian, and we're going to enter the second fight. So this fight honestly isn't that much different from the first. The Mace Monster still has all of its moves. It's pretty much exactly the same, and really the Bow Guardian isn't hard, it's just a little bit tedious to deal with. She's like shooting all these arrows on you, raining down arrows of her own, and then she only stays still for like a couple seconds, so you really can only get like 1 or 2 attacks in, which I cannot even fathom how hard it's going to be if you come here with a slow setup. If the Guardians can be this flexible in your movement, why can't I, right? So we're gonna finish up with this fight now. I do believe that was a no-hit as well, though I'm sure this isn't going to be the case once we get to Cleo. So from my couple runs, I realized that the one Guardian that you should be avoiding at all costs is Cleo, because she does the most amount of damage out of all the 3 Guardians, which is a little bit hard considering that she has a 3-hit combo in like her attacks, and even if you parry it with a shield, you cannot interrupt that attack pattern. So take that how you will. It does give you a slight disadvantage now that you know how to avoid them, but I do plan on doing like a boss guide of sorts on the 3 Guardians as well as the Queen. Now, despite the changes to their health, I stand by my words that this entire sequence is much easier with a faster setup. Now, I don't have any issues with this, it's just that if you're going to paywall content, you might as well make it accessible to as many builds as possible, right? It doesn't really make sense to faster builds a significant edge in these encounters. But hey, that's really just what I think. So at this fight, the previous bosses are all here, but they're not gonna all gang up on you at the same time. And really, realistically, only 2 of them will attack you at the same time. You don't really have to worry that much, and from what I can tell, a lot of these attacks can be dodged if you just move like side to side from the arena. So this is going to be like a little preview from my boss guide, but you can be pretty safe if you just stay like in the 2 corners of the arena, because I find that just having like an additional escape route is extremely good. Especially if you're being cornered, and especially if you don't have a shield and you have to dodge and attack, you can just jump up on the platform above you. So this is usually the sequence of how this fight goes. Usually, I think Euterpe is her name. She's usually the last one to go down. But just like the previous encounter, this Guardian is pretty easy to defeat. It's just a little bit tedious because you only get like very small windows to get in some attacks. Anyways, that was the fight. It's still gonna take a lot more training for me to get that no-hit, but maybe I'll get there someday. So, enough said, let's go fight the Queen. This is the final confrontation. Now, with that impressive performance, let's see how this build can measure up to the Queen. Now, at this stage of the game, I do have 35 stats, which is very high. We are gonna enter this small dialogue. I wish she said something different every time we came here, but well, we can probably expect that from a future update. So anyways, the Queen. Very different boss than anything that I'm used to. There's a lot that can be said about how her attacks get you, but I feel like with the melee builds, you need to have like a lot of fast responses to her moves, because she can actually parry you, which is not something that I've seen in any other boss in the game. Now, at the very least, this fight is a lot faster than the 5BC boss. And even with the increased health, I'm not sure how much health she actually got from the hotfix, but I don't think it's that much. I don't notice like a very significant change. So while she slashes the screen at you, that's probably your best time to put down your turrets. And I find that the best way to dodge these splitting screen attacks is to just move really slowly towards one direction. So while she slashes at me, it's actually fairly easy to get these attacks in. It's fairly easy to kite around her attacks and just dodge at the same time. Now of course, with this giant screen splitting attack, all you really have to do is dodge. The timing is a little bit weird, so you might have to get used to it. But if you're having trouble, I mean, the training room was introduced in 2.5, and you can just use that. Anyways, the Queen is down. So hope you all enjoyed this Bladed Tonfas showcase. I certainly had a lot of fun. I think if given the opportunity, this weapon does have what it takes to be one of the best damage dealers in the game. Anyways, for those that haven't seen it, here is the ending. Thank you all for tuning into this showcase, and I'll see you all in the next video.